So a warmest welcome to all as Pax Christi Toronto celebrates its annual honoring of the Blue Scarf Movement and its bestowal of the Teacher of Peace Award. I believe we can look forward to a very rich and stimulating afternoon. We can offer this webinar on Zoom thanks to our collaboration with World Beyond War Canada and its Canada organizer, Rachel Small. Thank you very much, Rachel, for all your help. And thanks to all of you again who are gathered here with us today. How can we have a celebration if we don't have a group with whom to celebrate? Bienvenue à tous nos amis francophones qui sont peut-être ici cet après-midi. C'est si bon d'être en relation avec vous pour célébrer la paix. We found that people really seem to appreciate having an overview of what's to come. So I'm going to begin now by just going through the whole schedule of the afternoon. So we're all can see the roadmap. We're going to begin with some reflective music offered by John Bonker, not just yet, John. Okay. And a land acknowledgement offered by Mary Lou Jorgensen Bonker. And we will then hear the story and work of the Blue Scarf Movement. And this will be presented by Father Bob Holmes. Then Pax Christi Toronto's chairperson, Rosemary Keenan, will offer us the history of our Teacher of Peace Award. And next, we will introduce our award winner this year, Ms. Kehkashan Basu, and bestow the award upon her. And in response, Kehkashan will share with us the mission of her life and all of her activities. Following Kehkashan's presentation, we will offer a few minutes of Q&A to allow you, our audience, to interact with her. And we'll invite you to place your questions in the chat box. We're also honored to have former Senator Douglas Roche with us, and he will respond to Kehkashan's presentation and all of her work throughout the world. And after some closing remarks, we'll bring our event to a close with more reflective music. So at this time, I'd like to introduce our musician today, Dr. John Bonker, a good friend of Pax Christi Toronto. With a background in history, John is also very active in climate and environmental protection and justice, and has written a great deal on these subjects. His gift of music is one that we deeply appreciate. So please, John, you may begin to share your gift with us.
We acknowledge that we meet on Indigenous land. This is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the First Credit Nation. We gratefully acknowledge these Indigenous nations for their guardianship of this land. We'd also like to remind and reaffirm, as Torontonians and Canadians, our accountability to these Indigenous nations and to all Indigenous peoples and communities living in Toronto. This land is also part of the Dish with One Spoon territory, a treaty between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Anishinaabe, and allied nations to peaceably share and care for this land, its waters, and all of the biodiversity in the Great Lakes region. All those who come to live and work here are responsible for honoring this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect.
Many thanks to John and to Mary Lou. Thank you, John. That music was so beautiful and sets us a peaceful tone for our whole afternoon. And thank you, Mary Lou, for helping us to always remember this precious land and all on it where we live. So I'd like to now introduce Angela Oriano Schwam, a member of Pax Christi Toronto, who is going to lead us in prayer.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. At a time of great challenges for humanity and our beautiful planet, we are encouraged now by signs of hope with the emergence of a new sense of urgency for ecological justice and peace. And so we gather now to pray for guidance on the way forward to our Creator and to the one who's called the Prince of Peace. The prayer is taken from the papal encyclical Laudato Si by Pope Francis, entitled A Prayer for Our Earth. All-powerful God, you are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of your creatures. You embrace with your tenderness all that exists. Pour out upon us the power of your love, that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with peace, that we may live as brothers and sisters, harming no one. O God of the poor, help us to rescue the abandoned and forgotten of this earth, so precious in your eyes. Bring healing to our lives, that we may protect the world and not prey on it, that we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction. Touch the hearts of those who look only for gain at the expense of the poor and the earth. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, to be filled with awe and contemplation, to recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey towards your infinite light. We thank you for being with us each day. Encourage us, we pray, in our struggle for justice, love, and peace. Amen.
Thank you very much, Angela. And so at this time, I would like to introduce Father Bob Holmes, who is a member of the Basilian congregation, a member of Pax Christi Toronto, and a former recipient of the Teacher of Peace Award. Father Bob has been very actively involved in the work of peace and justice from his days as a teacher, and then his participation over years now in the Christian peacemaker teams, but also his leadership in the Basilian Center for Peace, Justice, and the Integrity of Creation, and publishing of its newsletter, Stirrings. Also his being a founding member of the group Catholics for Peace and Justice in the Holy Land, and his connection with the youth organization Camp Micah. It was through his renown over years working with the Christian peacemaker teams in the Holy Land that he was invited in 2017 to meet the young Afghan peace volunteers who were the founders of the Blue Scarf movement. Father Bob, you are eminently qualified to introduce us to the Blue Scarf movement. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mary Ellen. And it's fitting that we, as we prepare to, to have this wonderful Teacher of Peace Award today, that we remember that this is also the week we celebrate the United Nations International Day of Peace, which is when we usually have our Blue Scarf Peace March in Toronto. And so it's good that we take a few moments to acknowledge this other group of young teachers of peace active in Afghanistan, the Afghan Peace Volunteers. And so I'm going to put a little thing up on screen here. There we go. So these are the Afghan Peace Volunteers, and they started this international movement of the Blue Scarf, and they're fantastic people. And I was really delighted to be invited there. And when I got to the airport, this young woman, as you see in the center here, was one of the people who welcomed me there. And the three older people are members of the Afghan Peace Volunteers. And the young children here are their street kids school. So they're really doing great work. But I really want to tell you a little bit about Zarguna, who's this wonderful woman that met me. She's got that word enough written on her hand. And I said, Zarguna, what does that mean in this picture that she was showing me? And she said, well, it's enough war. We've had enough of it. We need to do something different. We need to work for a non-violent world. And it means enough equality. Inequality between men and women, between the different tribes, different religions, different countries. We need to work for equality across the board. And enough of this global warming. We've got to change our ways. We have to work to make the green planet. It was a very powerful introduction to their work. And then, I met with some of the other members, and here they have 17 teams, and each team is led by a man and a woman, a young man and a young woman. And here's the young woman, she's in the Blue Scarf team. And I said, what does that border free mean on your scarves that we all wear? She said, well, it means that all humans must live free and equal under one blue sky. And also who met me at the airport was Dr. Hakim. He's the founding member of the Afghan Peace Volunteers. And we had a long talk, and he says, these are the building blocks of our volunteers. Number one, he says, that we become a border-free family. It's one world. And also that we have an egalitarian self-government. He's the founder, but he doesn't run the organization. there's a man and a woman, a young man and a young woman, who are the directors, and then each of those 17 teams has a man and a woman who work it. So it's equal. It's beautiful. And there are certain shared values that are really important that everybody agrees with, and that non-violence is one of the key ones. This cooperative economics that they believe in, the capitalistic system is destroying everything, and they're working on that, and they do it as best they can in Kabul, and also working to abolish wars. This is a major thing that they do, having grown up all of their lives in a war zone. And of course, restoring the relationship with nature. That's really, really important. Those are the building blocks that are behind our Blue Scarf movement that they managed to spread. And the picture of a lot of them gathered together. And their mission, the way they describe it on their own website, is that they seek to nurture a nonviolent relationships and alternative ways to build a green, equal world without war. It's really powerful. And they're all computer literate and internet literate, and they've spread this message across the whole world. And we picked it up here in Toronto with our International Peace Day walk. And, we carry these banners that come straight from their work, building a border-free world without war under one blue sky. Well, as you know, today is a difficult time for them. They are now refugees in their own city with the Taliban thing. So I just want to say a little bit more about that, and then I'll turn it back to you, Mary Ellen. The lives of these young peacemakers that we've just been talking about is in danger now because the Taliban have taken over control of Kabul. They're really refugees in their own city and in their own country. Some of them have actually made their way safely to Pakistan, and Zarguna and her spouse and child are among them. And we here in Canada are working to have them totally accepted officially by our government. So that's the work we're doing right now. Back to you, Mary Ellen.
Thank you, Father Bob. Thank you too for not only giving us that history, but also the present situation of these young people. And I mean, you didn't mention, but of course we know the fact that we're wearing our blue scarves today and that we've had these annual gatherings, that the blue scarf movement has grown around the world. And certainly we want to keep working with these young people. So your presentation offers us a very meaningful entrance into the remainder of our program today. That we want to continue to be inspired by these youth in such a vulnerable and dangerous situation. And we honor the courageous leadership of youth around the world. So at this point, I would like to call on Rosemary Keenan, the chairperson of Pax Christi Toronto, to set the scene for our bestowal of the Teacher of Peace Award this year. And she will share the history of this annual ceremony. Rosemary?
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Thank you, Sister Mary Ellen. Each year since 2013, Pax Christi Toronto, a member group of the global peace organization Pax Christi International, has recognized an outstanding peacemaker with the Teacher of Peace Award ceremony and a special gathering. In 2013, we recognized Sister Mary Ellen Mary Alban Bouchard's tireless work for justice and peace, her activism against nuclear war, her leadership in establishing Pax Christi in Canada, and her many years working with the poorest communities in Haiti, where she enabled her students to establish a written Creole language and helped women establish micro-businesses to support themselves and their families. Sister Mary Alban Bouchard of the community of St. Joseph was named Pax Christi Teacher of Peace in September 2013. In selecting a Pax Christi Toronto Teacher of Peace, we actively promote the idea of peace and the importance of peace building. Teachers of peace show us through their actions how to address issues of justice and peace in our communities. They invite and enable all of us to take responsibility for seeking nonviolent solutions to conflict. We are grateful to have with us today 3 outstanding Pax Christi peace builders: Father Bob Holmes, whom you have met, Sister Mary Ellen Francoeur of the Sisters of Service, a Kairos Women of Courage delegate and a volunteer with the Religions for Peace Canada, and Honorable Doug Roche, author, parliamentarian, diplomat, and lifelong campaigner for peace and human security. In 1963, Pope John Paul XXIII gave us his encyclical Pacem in Terris, Peace on Earth, telling us that all have the right to live in peace. In 1968, Pope Paul VI told us in his World Day of Peace message, the world must be educated to love peace, to build it up and defend it. And now, today, Pope Francis tells us that peace is a great and precious value for the entire human family, and that we must care for each other and our common home. The Pax Christi Teacher of Peace Award reminds us that we are called to integrate gospel nonviolence explicitly into our lives, and that peace building is an act of courage, love, and perseverance. With the Pax Christi Teacher of Peace Award, we honor the witness of a peace builder whose vision and strategies of nonviolence respond to the monumental crises of our time, whose work is a timely reminder that the quest for justice and peace never ends and is always relevant, whose determination and leadership exemplify the search for nonviolent solutions to conflict situations, and whose rootedness in and impact on their community continue to move others to perform acts of peace building. Thank you to all who are able to join us today.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. This history is a perfect segue into my introduction of our Teacher of Peace for this year, 2021, Ms. Kehkashan Basu. And so, Kehkashan, you've been in the background there up until this moment, but I want to just express what a joy it is to introduce you today as Pax Christi Toronto's 2021 Teacher of Peace. We began our connection several years ago when I first heard of your concerns about nuclear disarmament, nuclear weapons, the continuing existence of nuclear weapons, and your great concern for the climate. And since then, I've made a few attempts to bring you into our Pax Christi community. Today, that is finally a reality. Kehkashan, now 21, was born in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. very significantly on June 5th, World Environment Day. And as she says herself, that seemed to direct her to a life dedicated to the earth and all who live on the earth. Her activism began at the age of 8, when she was moved by the suffering of animals due to pollution, and then the desertification of land around her. She gathered other children to plant trees. First activist gesture. A few years later, she would write a book for children called The Tree of Hope. At age 12, she became the founder president of the global social innovation enterprise, the Green Hope Foundation, that works at the grassroots level in 25 countries, educating and empowering young people in very creative ways in the process of implementing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. She believes that, and I'm quoting, education is the key to change and youth can take the lead, close quotes. Kehkashan and her family immigrated to Canada when she was in her mid-teens, seeing Canada as a place where she could most effectively carry her work further. We are privileged, Kehkashan, that you have chosen Canada as your base and your home. Along with founding the Green Hope Foundation at age 12, she also became recognized at that age by the United Nations, being elected to the UN Environment Program as Global Coordinator for Children and Youth. Her presence at the UN and recognition by organizations around the world has never stopped. Kehkashan is the youngest trustee of the Parliament of World's Religions, also the council lead of the Toronto St. Paul's Constituency Youth Council of Canada. And she is a member of the World Humanitarian Forum Youth Council. Kehkashan has tirelessly worked to amplify the voices of young people, women, and girls in decision-making processes. She is a United Nations human rights champion, and she is the winner of the 2016 International Children's Peace Prize. She is the winner of the WUSC, that's W-U-S-C, the Louis Perenbaum Impact and Innovation Award. And she became the first ever winner on August 5th, 2020, of the Voices Youth Gorbachev Schultz Legacy Award for her work on nuclear disarmament. These are simply a few of the awards she continues to receive every year. As a champion of and educator on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, Kehkashan has always had a powerful sense of the interconnectedness of all that is needed to bring about a world of justice, environmental care, and peace. A number of times a year, she travels around the world to places where the most marginalized and disadvantaged children and families live. She knows intimately the face of poverty, oppression, and injustice. But the contributions of the Green Hope Foundation and Kehkashan's workshops with children bring hope and empowerment. Throughout the pandemic, she has been organizing webinars with international leaders who are speaking to the way of carrying forward the Sustainable Development Goals and achieving a just recovery from the pandemic. Kehkashan, you have always been a teacher of peace. And today we honor this gift you share so generously. So Pax Christi offers you today this certificate expressing the basis for our choosing you as our Teacher of Peace 2021. Just show our certificate. And we will be getting that to you as soon as we can. So we're thrilled to have you here and now invite you to share with us whatever you're wishing today.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am extremely humbled and honored to be bestowed with the Teacher of Peace Award. We are all going through such difficult times, but even then, I count myself to be extremely privileged because I have a home, I have food and family, and most importantly, I have access to education. That to me is the biggest differentiator, one that provides me with the strength of knowledge to hold my own against any adversity. But there are millions and millions of people who don't have a home or food or education or all of these. I grew up with Swami Vivekananda's words, the more we come out and do good to others, the more our hearts will be purified and God will be in them. Ever since I can remember, I went out with my parents every weekend to distribute food and clothes to the underprivileged. My grandmother has an urban terrace garden where she grows her own food to this day. So my spirituality stemmed from doing good for people and planet because that is where I saw the divine. And I was brought up with the belief that my first religion is humanity. And for that reason, I grew up surrounded by different cultures, religions, spiritualities that allowed me to gain a better understanding of people and planet. As Mary Ellen mentioned, I was born and raised in Dubai, and my school in Dubai had more than 85 nationalities, children and students from 85 different countries. And I grew up considering myself to be a global citizen. My family always celebrates all religious festivals. Eid and Christmas are celebrated with equal fervor as Durga Puja and Diwali. And my spirituality has been deeply influenced by the work of Mother Teresa and Swami Vivekananda, two icons of peace and empathy who taught the world the power of compassion. And I vividly recall my first visit to Mother Teresa's Missionaries of Charity in Kolkata when I was 6 years old. And I remember being so distressed to witness the hundreds of children at the shelter. And my parents had told me then how Mother Teresa had dedicated her entire life for the service of the masses. And it was also there that I read her quote, "Peace begins with a smile." And it is this smile that our work endeavors to achieve amongst those who are the farthest. When I was 9 years old, I had taken part in a walk for water to show solidarity with those who have to walk miles in the sun to get water every day. And I remember telling my mother then that one day I would give clean water to entire villages and communities. And today, Green Hope Foundation has been able to do exactly that through the installation of our deep bore tube wells and solar irrigation systems. and seeing the joy on the children's faces when they get to drink clean water for the first time in their lives is, for me, the embodiment of divine power that brings about peace, happiness, and prosperity. We all know how the impacts of war, climate change, biodiversity loss affect our vulnerable populations the most, even though they're least responsible for it. And largely cited in the global south, the plight of these invisible people never really makes it to the pages or TV screens of Western media. And it is amongst these people that Green Hope Foundation bases its work, providing them with the tools and skill sets to climb out of this well of despair and poverty. And for me and my team at Green Hope Foundation, our battle is against this inequality because we believe inequality to be the greatest hurdle standing in the path of peace. It is this inequality, this lack of even the most basic of resources, food, clothing, education, clean water, lack of electricity, that leads to a complete loss of peace. But the irony of the situation is that we do have the solutions, the Sustainable Development Goals that provides us with a clear blueprint of action that addresses all these issues, providing targets and indicators for progress with a defined milestone of 2030, and localizing these SDGs to tailor them to the specifics of each region and each community is our modus operandi at Green Hope Foundation. And we do believe that education, in particular, education for sustainable development and peace education, is the most potent catalyst to drive this change. And this has been our force for good since I began my journey in this field 14 years ago as a 7-year-old. And for us at Green Hope Foundation, this education forms the basis of all that we do. The communities that we work in are the most marginalized. And we need to ask the question then, what does peace mean to the children of these communities? We cannot leave them behind. Hence, we use education as the tool to educate them and bring them right to the forefront of bringing about change. In Kenya, for instance, we engage with children of prisoners using art education, making sure that they get the same access to education as their counterparts across the world. 7-year-old Edward, as you can see in the image, spoke to us about how he loved learning new things every day. And he is oblivious to the fact that his mother is in prison. He doesn't really know what the future holds for him, but he has the passion to create a better world for all. And education is that catalyst that will allow him to bring about that change. We also educate children in the rural communities in Kenya through both art as well as outdoor learning, allowing them to express their ideas on how they can create a more sustainable and peaceful world. In Suriname, the world's most forested country, we've engaged with the children of the Maroon tribes of the Amazon rainforest, a community whose children are severely affected by lack of education. I remember during my last visit to the school in Suriname, there was a little girl who was standing outside the school gates with a baby with her and with a look of absolute longing on her face as she looked and stared into a classroom. And when my colleague asked her in Dutch why she was out there instead of in the classroom, she said that since her mother had to work, she was tasked with looking after her younger siblings and missing school in the process, while her older brothers got to go to school. And it's really heartbreaking to note that despite so much of the progress our world has made, there is still this lack of peace that allows us to still have lack of education all across the world. And in Suriname as well, we engaged with the children of an orphanage, providing them with that peace and sustainability education that today They run a pilot project in their school and orphanage to make it a plastic-free zone. Our work extends to those children affected by war and strife who risk becoming a lost generation, because once the Western news channels did their bit to showcase their plight for a little while, these children and their families are forgotten. We engage and educate the children in the Syrian refugee camps on the Lebanon-Syria border in no man's land, children who are so traumatized, who've never been given the chance to be a child. And through our education activities and initiatives, whether that's through sport or rap or dance, we were able to bring out the child in them, with some of them actually speaking for the first time in months, just because of the ability to have fun and learn at the same time. And it's a similar situation in the Rohingya refugee camp, the world's largest refugee camp, where the children don't even know how to read and write. And in providing them with that outlet to express their views through art, they were able to express their ideas for a better future for all. In Nepal, we engaged with both children of prisoners and a home for HIV-positive children. And these children, despite not knowing that they didn't have long to live, the enthusiasm of these children to learn and know more about how they could help people and plan for that within their short lifespans was so inspiring. And at Green Hope Foundation, our work focuses not just on educating children and youth, but also educating our educators, where we provide tools to teachers and educators to bring about sustainability and peace education into their classrooms and ensure that there are educators out there who are able to provide the education in non-formal ways to children who still don't have access to education, using both formal and non-formal and creative methods of communication that could help in educating youth to get more involved in the implementation of the SDGs and bring about change. And we've not stopped our work during the pandemic. In fact, our efforts have doubled to ensure that children don't miss out on learning and education. We've continued our education academies online from India to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We are using sports as a way to teach children, and it's a wonderful way of capacity building and building peaceful societies. And our sports for SDGs, football and kickball tournaments engage youth of these communities in learning about the SDGs, and in particular, learning about Goal 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. We have built toilets next to schools in rural communities to ensure that children, and especially the girls, have a safe and healthy environment at their school, and then they're actually willing to continue going to school, because a lot of them drop out of school not just because of conservative families, but because of the tremendous sexual harassment that they face that often stems from not having toilets in their schools. And these toilets now provide them with that safe space over there. Our solar-powered mobile library is providing books and learning to thousands of children in different parts of the world. And our reading corners within the mobile library are where our members help the children out with their learning whenever required. We have also installed routers in villages to ensure digital connectivity, to bridge the digital divide and make sure that children can access their online classrooms. Our computer literacy programs across the world provide children, and especially girls in rural communities, with the necessary skill sets to find gainful employment that allows them to create local circular bioeconomies and uplift their communities. And these are the pictures from the most recent graduate class of our computer literacy program in Liberia. So through all of our actions, we seek to create peace through education, because knowledge gives us that power to act and create change. So I would like to thank you once again for honoring me with the Teacher of Peace Award. It is an award that it will motivate me to continue doing my work and ensure that we can create just and equitable societies for all. And, I shall do my utmost to live up to it and really ensure that no child ever again suffers from the lack of access to education. And just to conclude, as Swami Vivekananda said in his closing address at the inaugural session of the Parliament of the World's Religions way back in 1893, let us help and not fight. Let's pursue assimilation and not destruction. Let's achieve harmony and peace and not dissension. Thank you once again.
Well, I just want to applaud Kehkashan. That is just so inspiring. And I think that one of the things the world desperately needs now is hope. And I think in just so many ways, you bring hope. You show that a little girl of 6 and 7 years of age can do incredible things and then grow, that you had a special gift and you have used your gift very, very generously. And I think this is the first time I've seen as broad a picture of all the work of the Green Hope Foundation. And it really is, it's a teaching for us all about what is possible, and even your creative ways of educating children, meeting them where they are, and as you say, bringing smiles to their faces while they are learning such important things and feeling empowered. So thank you so much. And I'm wondering and hoping that you're open to a few questions from those gathered here today, just so they have a chance to connect with you. We don't have a great deal of time for that, but we really would like to allow people that opportunity. So I don't know whether anyone has already put some questions in the chat. If not, you can do that. Or at this point too, anyone who has a question, just put up your hand, and one of our members, Carolyn Sue Kralik, is going to be keeping her eyes open to notice you and invite you to ask.
Mary Lou has a question.
How old are you now, Kehkashan?
I'm 21.
21. That is just so great. Like, I had a brain hemorrhage when I was 17 and a half years old, and I was unconscious for 8 weeks' time, in hospital for 7 months, and in intensive care for 6 weeks' time. But I was also an honors student in grade 13. I was also first vice president of the Ontario Catholic Students Federation. I was going places, but I admire you so much. That was my husband, John, there, who has his PhD in history, and he's just a great man. He really is.
Thank you, Mary Lou.
We have a question from Rosemary. How can we support Green Hope Foundation?
Well, I can put our website in the chat, and there are myriad ways that you can support Green Hope Foundation, whether that is in kind or, making sure that, you can volunteer your time or provide support. With one of our greatest challenges is funding as a youth-led and young woman-led organization, or really just providing your expertise in helping us carry out our projects and our work all across the world. So there are numerous ways that you can support us, and I'd be happy to let you know about them if you'd like to get in touch. So I'll just put the website in the chat, and you can check out our work there and get in touch with us over there through our contact us button. So yeah.
We have a very kind thank you from Helena, who says, "Thank you, Kehkashan. I'm so inspired with your goodness and light. So glad you have this award."
Thank you so much.
Okay, I don't see any other questions at this time, Mary Ellen.
Okay. I'll just invite anyone again, if there's anyone who has a question who'd like to just put up their hand, just to give you a chance.
Tina, do you have your hand up? No, okay. No, I don't see anyone. No.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Kehkashan, and that's great. So we will move on then to, oh, and I just, maybe just to say, if until we finish here this afternoon, if a question comes into anyone's mind, put it into the chat. Maybe you're asking for information, and we will send you up a follow-up message. And if we can, we'll include any information you ask for in that. Thank you. So we had, as I mentioned at the beginning, we've invited the Honorable Douglas Roche to be with us here today to respond to Kehkashan. And it's truly an honor to welcome former Senator Douglas Roche, Honorable Douglas Roche, who is here with us today, really to represent all of us in responding to Kehkashan. We can see it as an intergenerational exchange. There could be so much to say about Senator Doug Roche, but I will focus kind of on essentials. He is, to this very day, a prolific writer of articles and books on the subjects of disarmament, culture of peace, human rights, and human security. He is a former parliamentarian and a very active member of the Senate. He's been a diplomat and Canadian ambassador to the United Nations for disarmament. He held that position for several years. And while at the United Nations, he was also elected as chairman of the Disarmament Committee. Later, he would become the founder and ultimately chairman emeritus of the Middle Powers Initiative, traveling to non-nuclear states to encourage the building of relationships and cooperation in working for disarmament. His tireless dedication led to his being honored with the Order of Canada, and then seeing this honor as having a potential purpose, he, along with other recipients of the Order of Canada who were equally passionate about nuclear disarmament, became founding members of the group Canadians for a Nuclear Weapons Convention. Senator Roach has been a model for all as a lifelong activist for peace and as a courageous visionary. We in Pax Christi Toronto have already recognized him as an ambassador for peace. And just making a connection with our event today, one of the very first times I experienced Kehkashan was when she and Senator Roach were co-panelists at the last Parliament of the World's Religions, both of them speaking on nuclear disarmament. Over the last months, Kehkashan has invited him to join panels on her various webinars. They both share a passion for a more collaborative, sustainable, and peaceful world. And so, Senator Roach, we look forward to your remarks today.
Well, thank you, Mary Ellen. Good afternoon to everyone, and congratulations to Kehkashan. Well done, but Kehkashan, you're still at the beginning. There's so much more that you're going to do in the world, and I'm here today to encourage you on. Mary Ellen said this was an intergenerational event. I guess that is true, since there is 71 years difference in the ages of Kehkashan and myself. So I suppose you might say we're coming at the problems of world peace and security from both ends of the spectrum. But I can say that the work of Kehkashan and others that are other young people that are involved in the human security agenda give me an immense amount of hope, and I'm not Kehkashan. I'm not quite ready to depart my work yet, but as I look to the stage of winding down. I take a great heart in you and your colleagues, many of whom I taught for a lot of years. And so I have a lot of experience with young people, and for a very good reason, as the Secretary General of the United Nations expressed his hope too. I want to talk about the Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, for a moment, because a week or so ago, he released a document called Our Common Agenda, which was a response to the requests of the countries of the world to give a sweeping outline of how to deal with this emergency that the world is passing through. And of course, we're conscious of the climate emergency, but there's an emergency that's been brought about by the pandemic, the coronavirus, by nuclear weapons, and by the disparities in economic and social development. The combined effect of the interlocking global problems in the world today has created an emergency the like of which history has not recorded. For never in history have we at the same time had the capacity to destroy all of humanity and also the knowledge and techniques of how to make the benefits of human development available to everyone. I mean, it's a fascinating intersection and in world history. And so I agree with Barack Obama, who said not long ago that if one could choose any moment to be born on the whole history of the world, we choose now because it is so exciting and so possible. I agree with that. But so many of us are bogged down and even despair when we see day after day this pile up of problems, which are so exacerbated by the suffering caused by the pandemic and the lack of vaccine, fair, equitable vaccine distribution around the world. So I started to mention a moment ago the Secretary General of the United Nations. His report, called Our Common Future, is a sweeping set of proposals on putting in more fairness, one would say, into the world system, and not least, incidentally, opening the opportunities for women to participate and lead in the quest for peace and peacemaking and peace building. And so he's a very strong section on the role of women. But he also, and it's in this context of our meeting today that I think this following section I'm going to refer to is so relevant, because in this document, which I say covers the whole world, Mr. Guterres gives a special section, a special attention to youth, and not just in a cursory way. Say, well, we all have to have hope for youth, and so on. No. What he wants to do is to integrate youth into the present decision-making processes. And he points out that There's now 267 million young people who are not in education, employment, training, and 2/3 of whom are young girls and young women. And the pandemic has made their situation all the worse. And so we have to understand the dilemma, the anguish, the pain that so many young people have today, and when they don't see that they have a stake in society or a viable future. So they need to see that society believes in them and it will invest in them. And so he's doing his part by building up the strength of youth organizations and the participation of young people and raising their profile by proposing the establishment of a dedicated United Nations office for youth in the Secretariat. And this dedicated youth office is going to integrate all the activities of the UN that serve as a platform for youth to become involved in peace, sustainable development, humanitarian issues, and human rights. Kehkashan, I hope that somehow a way can be found to relate you and that office, and maybe we could talk about that sometime. But Mr. Guterres goes further than opening an office for youth at the United Nations now to advance the human common security agenda. He's also proposing that he will appoint a special envoy for future generations. Now, just think of that: an envoy for future generations. These are people who are not even born yet. He points out that in the rest of this century, 80 some years left in this century, there's going to be 10.9 billion people who will be born, most of them in Africa and Asia, areas that are already disadvantaged and need so much focus to be raised by the rest of the world on their problems of climate and technology and development. And so this special envoy for future generations is going to be tasked with representing the interests of those who are still to come. That I would call that preventive diplomacy underlined. We all know that it's much better to prevent a war rather than to clean up afterwards, which most in my generation have been doing. So the prevention of both disease and social inequities and the fatal worsening of the climate, all of that to be put into the framework that we have to protect the world. But I think they're of the indigenous people who have said so for so long that they have to think 7 generations down of the effect of policies today. So this exploring the future opens up a political space for younger generations today, and they are so clearly coming to the fore, as the example of our honoree today illustrates. Further, Mr. Guterres' report that he tabled in the United Nations, a couple of days ago, he spoke at an event marking the International Day of Peace, which we're celebrating at this time. And again, Mr. Guterres saluted the voices, vision, and commitment of young people in shaping a more peaceful world. So he wants youth to keep pushing governments, and other leaders to close the gap between the vaccine gap and the rich-poor gap, the climate gap, and keep sounding the alarm on the deterioration of international relations. So there's the agenda, and I just find it remarkable that we have such attention paid to the involvement of youth in the realization of the solutions and the programs that have to be done now. All of this raises a hope for me that we can actually participate. Well, we are participating, but we participate at a deeper level in the great transformation that is taking place at our time in history. And that's the transformation from a culture of war to a culture of peace. We had a culture of war that dominated the 20th century. We had 2 world wars, 100 million people were killed. And so in this century, we have so far, at least, and pray that it continues, avoided a world war and avoided the use of nuclear weapons. But the threat of nuclear weapons and the threat of climate and the threat of the pandemic is at rising levels. And so we cannot be complacent or take a lethargic attitude toward what's happening in our planet, as so many people do, and the media and so on, and let alone the political establishment. And so we need to, all of us, harness the resources within us and each play a role. Every person, no matter who or where that person is located in life, has a role to play. And each of us is called to participate in a great development of a culture of peace. That is where we're going in a world. This is a wonderful moment. We have to overcome the ennui and the problems and the dragging down. We've got to come up on top of that and participate with all our vigor. Kehkashan, I see that in you and many of your colleagues, and I tell you that it fills my poor old heart with delight. Thank you to Pax Christi and all the work you do, and thank you to Kehkashan.
Thank you so very much, Douglas Roche, for complimenting and giving new dimensions to the presentation of Kehkashan. As you say, so much is possible when, and Kehkashan has said this too, so much is possible when and if the peoples and nations of the world work together for the common good and the good of the earth. We look to the youth, such as Kehkashan, as energetic leaders, as you say, and also committing to listening to their vision and working with them and carrying it all forward. So thank you again, Douglas Roche. And on behalf of Pax Christi Toronto, many thanks to you again, Kehkashan, for accepting our Teacher of Peace Award. We know that you will continue to be an influential teacher, and we sincerely hope that you will join us in various ways to spread the messages of peace, which inevitably include care for the climate and all the most disadvantaged upon the earth. Thanks to all who have joined us here today. Merci à toutes et à tous qui ont participé ici cet après-midi. We hope you have been inspired to be teachers in your own way, wherever you are. Together, we will build a world of peace. Many thanks to Rachel Small and World Beyond War Canada, without whom this event could not have taken place. And so good evening, and we hope to see you again next year for our Teacher of Peace ceremony. Many blessings on you and on our world. And I call on John again to share his music one more time as we part and go on with our lives. I think, John, you and Mary Lou's computer must be muted. We can't hear.
Kind of unmute.
It's unmuted.
Okay, now you're unmuted.
Okay.
Thanks.